Welcome back with the newest installment of the top 100 best albums or my top 100 favorite albums of all time videos. Today it's number 70 to number 61. So according to this list, my 70th favorite album of all time is Nico's To A Seagull, I think from 1967 or 1968. Anyway, shortly after, the Velvet Underground and Nico, after the Velvet Underground and Nico, Nico had to leave the Velvet Underground, but especially John Cale, was very heavily involved in her first solo album, and it's probably her most pleasant to the ears album. I also like the albums she did after that, which became more and more out there and eerie and a bit weirder. This is probably her pop moment, her pop album, or singer-songwriter, orchestral singer-songwriter album. John Cale, her at that time already ex-band colleague John Cale of the Velvet Underground, was heavily involved in this album. Did he produce it? Produced by Tom Wilson, who also produced some of the best Bob Dylan albums, also around that time, mid-60s. But it's really an all-star cast of people helping her also with the songwriting. Jackson Browne writes one song, the very famous song These Days. Even Bob Dylan wrote the song I'll Keep It With Mine and gave it to her, and it's a fantastic song. Like I said, John Cale wrote some songs. It's really a fantastic orchestral singer-songwriter pop album of the mid to late 60s, very autumnal album, I would say. The next album is 69, of course, Back in the USA by MC5. This is one of my favorite pure rock and roll albums. This is really a rock and roll album, and in that sense, probably one of my top 10 favorite rock and roll albums of all time. This is about studio albums, of course, so I won't rank any live albums in this list, but Kick Out the Jams, the live album by MC5, which I think was even released before that. I think Kick Out the Jams was kind of the debut album by MC5, if I'm not mistaken. And it's a live album, and it's a fantastic live album. And in terms of iconicness and legendary status, it's at least as big as this album. But like I said, I'm going to rank studio albums here, and also because even if I would rank live albums, I think I still slightly prefer this album. It's a fantastic rock and roll album by MC5. Next one is a tie. I think, I often said it, I don't like ties in these lists, because by doing lots of ties, a top 100 suddenly is like a top 125 or something. But I think I have 2 or 3 ties in the complete top 100 list, and there's always kind of reasons, or at least I think these are valid reasons for having a tie. This is one of those 2 or 3 ties that I have. It's Pet Shop Boys, and I just couldn't decide, and I think I like their first 2 studio albums about the same. One day I will prefer the debut album Please, and the next day I will prefer the second album Actually. They're both masterpieces, like all 100 albums in this list, of course. It's a fantastic start into their career. They really start with hits. Please could also be, if it's not the Pet Shop Boys, every other 80s pop band you can think of, Please would be a worthy greatest hits album, and it's their debut album. It has classics like West End Girls, Love Comes Quickly, Suburbia, although I'm not too much a fan of the album version of Suburbia, but still a fantastic song, Opportunities, and actually even tops Please in terms of hits. But I think as an album experience, I slightly might prefer Please, but in terms of the hit density, I think actually manages to top Please with What Have I Done to Deserve This, Rent, It's a Sin, Heart. It's incredible how what fantastic hit songwriters Neil Tennant and Chris Lowe were that early on in their career. 2 fantastic Pet Shop Boys albums. Next album, one of my all-time favorite Bob Dylan albums, 67, is Desire. I think, I'm not sure, do I prefer it to Blood on the Tracks? I'm not sure if Blood on the Tracks will still be one of those albums in the top 100, but I think probably I don't have Blood on the Tracks in the top 100, because usually when I'm thinking about Bob Dylan, and once I rank the complete discography of Bob Dylan on this channel, I think Desire is always ahead of Blood on the Tracks, which I also like. But Desire is even, it feels even more emotional, which is strange, because it's one of the few, if not the only, album in Dylan's catalog, apart from covers albums, where he didn't write most or many of the lyrics. There was a lyricist for this album. What was his name? I think Jacques Levy. Jacques Levy wrote most of the lyrics, and Dylan most or all of the music. But still, it's such a personal sounding album. This is the real divorce album, not Blood on the Tracks. And the last track on this album, Sarah, is the ultimate divorce and separation song, in my opinion. So it often gets overshadowed a bit by the predecessor, Blood on the Tracks, but it's at least as good, in my personal opinion, even better and more, like I said, emotional than Blood on the Tracks to me. And it also has this kind of great exotic gypsy violin circus flair that, there's only this one album in Dylan's catalog that sounds like that. Or I would say there's only this one album in pop history that sounds like that. It's a very unique sound, unique production, and I love it. Number 66 is an album I have on CD but not on vinyl. It's Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention's debut album, Freak Out. It must have been 1966, and I think it only came out like 1 or 2 months after Bob Dylan's Blonde on Blonde. And Blonde on Blonde was the first pop double album of all time, or so they say, and therefore this must have been the second double album, pop rock double album of all time. And it even feels more like a real double album, in the sense like we think about double albums these days, than Dylan's Blonde on Blonde. Blonde on Blonde is just an album, it's just an album with like 14 tracks, which is, a usual kind of track list. They're just very long tracks, but this is really, an album in the sense of what the White Album would be, or Exile on Main Street. Like, it's really this eclectic, wild ride, this very long thing which can at times sound incoherent, but is just fascinating, and it's a very satirical album. Of course, it's Frank Zappa. I also think it's his best album. This is the only album on this list. Spoiler. I'm not a big fan of Frank Zappa, but this is a fantastic album, one of the best debut albums. It's a very funny album. It's one of the first albums that really satirizes or makes fun of pop music and pop stars and rock and roll, the rock and roll business. That would be like a lifelong theme for Frank Zappa in his music and in interviews. I'm a fan of Frank Zappa the guy more than Frank Zappa the musician. I really like listening to interviews with him. He seems very intelligent and funny at the same time. And this is an album that really encapsulates that brilliantly, and it's fantastic since it's also his first album, that he was this complete kind of visionary artist with his first album. So not the biggest Frank Zappa fan, but I always love this album, and I like 2 or 3 others of his albums. For example, the next album by the Mothers of Invention, We're Only in It for the Money, the Sgt. Pepper parody kind of, I also really, really like, but didn't make my top 100, unfortunately. Number 65, it's my favorite, The Kings album. The Kings are the Village Green Preservation Society, 68 I think. Wasn't a big hit at the time, but of course became iconic and legendary, after the fact. And I think it's, this is a very uncontroversial pick. I think this is on many people's lists their favorite Kings album. I really like the Kings, and I know they themselves, Ray Davies, always saw themselves as album artists, and the album was very important to him, and he was one of the first to really thought of the album as a piece of art, as a concept thing. This is also a concept album. But to me, the Kings were always best as a singles band in the 60s. It's the same like as with The Who are also those rock opera concept album guys, but I prefer the singles of The Who to the albums. And with the Kings, it's the same. They're more like a fantastic singles band to me. But this is the one album where they really, in my opinion, just my opinion, really did it on a great scale, a fantastic album and a fantastic concept album. The White Album by the Beatles came out around the same time, also Beggar's Banquet, so there was lots of competition at the time when they released it, so maybe that was one of the reasons why it didn't become a hit instantly, but it became a hit over the years and deservedly so. Great album, fantastic album. Village Green Preservation Society, The Kings. And 64 is also on CD, never had it on vinyl. I was surprised myself when I browsed through my records, for this video, and I always thought I had it on vinyl, but it seems I didn't, or I don't. But on CD, I have it for many years on CD, Born to Run by Bruce Springsteen. We already had Born in the USA, I think that was my number 100 of this top 100, so a very important placement in a way. But I much prefer this, it's number 64. Let's see if it will turn out my favorite Bruce Springsteen album. I think, like with the Kings, this would be a very uncontroversial pick for my favorite Bruce Springsteen album. But, maybe there will be a surprising one later, but not in this episode. Bruce Springsteen. Number 63, the Pet Shop Boys again. Please and Actually, I told you about, those are almost like greatest hits albums. They started out with 2 albums in 86 and 87 that, had the hit density of greatest hits albums. And then they decided for their 1990 album, for the first time, they decided to, like what I just told you about the Kings and The Who, but I think Pet Shop Boys succeeded with it, to make an album as an album statement, as a really, listening experience, and not so much about the hits. And of course, with these things, when an artist does that, of course it's not as successful as the albums that had the hits, but still it's, in many Pet Shop Boys fans, and also in my estimation, even better than the great fantastic albums that Please and Actually are. It's Behaviour from 1990. I mean, don't get me wrong, still great single songs like Being Boring, which was a single, but didn't chart as highly as the singles from the previous albums. But as an album, this is one, again, like with Bruce Springsteen, I'm not sure if it's my favorite album. I guess there will be more Pet Shop Boys albums in the next videos, but this is a fantastic album, and I think the Pet Shop Boys, I once ranked my top 20, top 30, top 40 favorite artists of all time, solo artists and bands. And I think Pet Shop Boys were like number 2, 3 or 4, so I'm really a big Pet Shop Boys fan, and this is one of their ultimate masterpieces, of course. 62 is Joni Mitchell, song To A Seagull. Is it her first or her second album? I'm a big Joni Mitchell fan, and my favorite phase of Joni Mitchell is the conventional folk singer-songwriter phase. I also like the things she did after that. I already had Hechira in this top 100, so one of her more jazzy experimental albums. But really when I like it the most, it's on those first 3-4 albums. And Song To A Seagull is, of course, a fantastic folk album of the 60s. And number 61, something a bit more modern. It's also more than 30 years old now, but for someone like me, this is a newish kind of album. It's 1994's Dogman Star by Suede. One of the best albums, one of the best Britpop albums of the 90s, and maybe even in general one of the best albums of the 90s. Again, like with Village Green Preservation Society, this also is a kind of a concept album by a band from London. This time it's more dark, Village Green Preservation Society is satirical but upbeat and good natured and cheerful concept album in a way. This is very dark and dense and angst driven kind of album, and I think it transcends what would be called Britpop around this time. It's maybe prog Britpop or something, or art Britpop, whatever you want to call it. It's a fantastic album, and it includes, for example, Wild Ones, which is maybe the best Suede song of all time. And the second side, or it's a double album on vinyl, so that the fourth side on the vinyl is like a rock opera in a way, but I prefer to all rock operas that The Who, for example, or the Kings, for that matter, ever produced. So that was number 70 to 61. Thank you very much for watching. Until next time, goodbye.